Hello and welcome back to the Preppy Podcast. Thank you all so much for being here and listening today. Before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you I would love if you followed at the Preppy Podcast on Instagram, as I love chatting with you guys and having you follow along. And we've been doing a lot of really amazing giveaways there. And also a reminder to rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. This is a way that helps me grow the podcast, reach new people, get on different charts, and continue to have this podcast and grow. So I really appreciate that as well. But today I have a great episode. I'm talking with Meg from Cailini Coastal. I actually had the privilege of hearing Meg speak at the New England Coastal Creative Conference a few months ago. And I've been a fan of her brand, I think since it launched, honestly. It's been a while, but I love how it has coastal inspiration, but is still modern and chic and classic all at the same time without being cheesy or leaning too hard into, some of those more cheesy seaside motifs. But I loved watching her business grow over Instagram, and I was really intrigued to learn more about how she got started, kind of what the inspiration was, how she grew, and what's next for the brand. So this is a great episode. One thing that I really liked is when she talks about Instagram growth, she obviously mentions that, a few years ago was a different time and it was easier to grow on Instagram, but she started a second account, and that one is seeming to grow quite steadily because it's more her and one-on-one with her and behind the scenes. And we talk about that so much that that's really what people are looking for. So definitely have a listen to that and let me know what you guys think. And let's get into this week's episode. All right. Well, thank you so much, Meg, for being on the podcast today. I had the pleasure of meeting you and hearing some about your business at Kim's New England Coastal Creative Conference. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course. So all of my listeners know that I like to start the podcast at the beginning. So tell me a little bit about young Meg. Like, what were you like as a kid? What was your childhood like? Were you creative, entrepreneurial? Tell me a little bit about growing up.
Yeah. So young Meg I was born in New York, and I grew up between New York and New Jersey. And I was always, I would say, very creative, but interestingly enough, in the performing arts. So when I was in high school, it really came down to, do I go professional route of pursuing professional dance as a ballerina, or do I want to be on Broadway? Truly, this is such a fun fact about me, because I don't do anything with either singing or dancing today. But those were my true passion, really the performing arts, and started all high school musicals. Just really funny to think about that in hindsight. And my dad was sort of like, listen, if you want support with your college tuition, you're not studying musical theater. So you need to find something that actually is lucrative. And so I ultimately chose my college really based on where could I double major in musical theater and communications, which I can't even remember how I landed on communications. I think I thought, I don't know about business. I'm not great with numbers. What's kind of creative? And communication feels like it's broad enough, and there's some great just sort of foundational skills you learn in this. So that will do. So I studied communications and musical theater at American University in Washington, D.C. And I think about a year in, I decided that I wanted to drop my musical theater double major to a minor, because I did not want to be a starving artist, and my parents were livid. So kind of school, it might be different today, but double major in musical theater was so hard. Yeah. So it really was a narrow search. And I still, loved the performing arts, but really kind of shifted into, as I was getting a little bit older, what is really more of a realistic career path. And I think more than wanting to be a starving artist, because listen, you can be a starving entrepreneur. I think what really was the takeaway of that is you have to have so much passion to get into certain industries that are really competitive. And
Yeah.
entrepreneurism is one of those industries. And without the intense passion, you're never going to make it. And I think what I realized ultimately at that time was I do love this, but I don't know that I have enough intensity behind this to really continue when times get hard, because inevitably it will.
Yeah.
And so I guess it was great that I had the foresight at, 19 to realize that. And so my first internship was and in the PR world, living in Washington, D.C., where everything was really catered to sort of government and politics, which was something I had at the time absolutely no interest in. I was able to find an internship that was truly like a diamond in the rough, interning in the PR department of the one Saks Fifth Avenue in Washington, D.C. It
Oh
was
my
actually
gosh.
Bethesda, Maryland. And it was fabulous. I worked in their PR department for a year. I was the only intern. It was everything you would imagine. It was glamorous. I mean, I was going to the, the like, what is it called? The embassy of French embassy,
Oh my
and
gosh.
Chanel fashion shows there and supporting that. Now I was doing like the grunt work, but it
You're
didn't
still
matter.
there.
I was
Yeah.
so thrilled to be there. And it was a really fun and exciting time. And I think what I realized was, wow, I love this fashion and beauty industry. It's really exciting, and it's fast paced. And so then when I was looking to graduate, I decided I want to work in PR. I want to continue working in PR in the fashion and beauty industry. And so I landed my first job, came back to New York at a firm in New York. You might know it, Allison Broad. It's actually called
Yes.
Allison Broad, I think, Marketing and Communications. But
Uh-huh.
at the time, it was ABPR.
Which
And
was like iconic and still is iconic, honestly, in PR.
I mean, I was there back when the city existed and like Whitney Port came in and filmed an episode there. It was like the heyday of it. And it was an amazing place to work and, cut my teeth. I mean, it was a grind. The hours were so intense, barely making ends meet. But I had an incredible network of people. And I think um, it was a really fundamental skill building for what would later come with building a business, because I mean it was really intense. And this was before iPhones, before people really were working on laptops. So if you're working 70, 80 hours a week, which I was, often that included coming in over the weekend,
Wow.
and you would have to come in because you had a desktop.
Yeah.
So
You were chained to that desk.
And so I think that, and it's funny, I have actually so many close friends who worked with me in those early years of my career who I'm still friends with. And we always talk about that time and just how it's sort of crazy, some of the things that we did and all of that. But it really was like, I just think it's sort of like weeded out people who like
Mhm.
weren't really able to like work really, really hard.
Yeah.
And
And didn't have the passion that you talked about earlier.
right, exactly, the passion.
Mhm.
And so from there, I ultimately went in house to a beauty brand called Jouer Cosmetics, based in Los Angeles, and I was their head of PR. And then I moved over to Kate Somerville to run their PR. And at the time, I think I was working at Kate 6 months. They got acquired by Unilever, so I went through like this big acquisition, and that was really exciting. And then I got pregnant and had my first daughter, and I returned to Kate 3 months after having my first daughter, and was pregnant again. And
Wow.
so at the time, at this point, it sounds really ridiculous to say, I was in my early 30s,
Okay.
and I started having some thoughts of like, okay, I'm running the PR for a Unilever owned brand. Where
Mhm.
do I really go from here? I could go to like maybe a bigger Unilever owned brand or L'Oreal
Mhm.
or water, but essentially I'm doing the same thing and starting to feel a bit like what's next. It is
Yeah.
crazy, but I do think there are certain industries where you can age out in a way. And in
Mm,
my early 30s, I already felt like I was aging out.
yeah.
Um, and that, I had a kid and the parties and things that once were glamorous and enticing, I didn't want to participate in it anymore. And so that's sort of where I started to feel the entrepreneurial itch. And I thought, well, maybe I'll start working for myself and I'll start my own PR
Mhm.
agency. And so, with the two girls back to back, I thought this will give me some flexibility. I can work from home. And so I did that, and it was incredibly successful. Kate was my first client. Then Jouet hired me back. I had Moon Juice. I
Wow.
had Dr. Lancer. I mean, incredible clients. And I got to the point where I was actually working more than I was in
Mhm.
house, with flexibility of where from. But I really got to the place where it was like, okay, I need to hire and grow
Yeah.
this to support myself. And when I thought about that, again, going back to this, sort of, do you have the passion? I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? I don't want to build this business. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to grow it. And that to me was a really big moment because
Yeah.
that's when I realized that, like, this is not, yes, I am an entrepreneur. I'm working for
Mhm.
myself, but it still doesn't feel right. I'm very connected to my intuition. And I really believe that if you're an intuitive person, and so many people are, if
Mhm.
you just kind of like sit quietly, a lot of times the answer comes to you, and.
Mhm.
And I knew that, PR and running a small agency was really not what I was sort of meant to do. So after that realization, it was like, well, okay, what is next?
Yeah.
And that, Patricia, was a very long process. I
Okay.
took time. I mean, I would say it was a full year of actively, like every week, putting in time and carving out time to explore like what could be next.
Mm.
And at the time I was listening to, have you heard of Marie Forleo?
Yes.
Okay. So her book had just come out, and
Mhm.
she had a podcast, and I was listening to her, and I found her very empowering, very, much about kind of like pursuing things that you were passionate about. And she had some tactical things in there as well, like, making lists of like, what do you enjoy doing, regardless
Mhm.
as to, whether or not it was actually something you could build a career out of. And
Mhm.
so I went through that list. One of the things on it was like singing and dancing, but that quickly fell into the bucket of like, I think that ship has sailed, so we'll knock that one off.
And you can still enjoy, but maybe not a career out of
As
it.
like a viewer, I love to go to Broadway shows and see the
Yes.
ballet in the city. Yeah, exactly. And so, one of the things that kept coming up was I loved interior design,
Yeah.
and I kind of glazed over that a bit in my childhood because it was sort of like so heavy on the performing arts. But when I looked back, I realized like it did start at a young age. I remember like rearranging furniture in my room when
Mm.
I was starting in middle school, just like constantly wanting to change things up. And my parents weren't buying me new things. So it was like working within what I had. How can I
Yeah.
make this feel different and look different? And remember the milk ads, the Got Milk ads?
Yes.
I had like collaged them all over my closet doors, and I made like art out of them. I mean, I wasn't like talented, but there was an interest and a
And
passion where
creativity.
creativity and playing
Mhm.
around with this interior space. And then same thing when I went to college, it was like, the dorm, sort of making that like as homey as possible within the constraints of a,
Yeah.
dorm room, was something where, like, in contrast to my roommate who sort of like really didn't care, like I really was excited by that, and going to Home Goods and like finding the right pieces. And so it really did sort of continue on to, my first tiny apartment in New York. And I always loved it. And I loved consuming, magazines really then that were, um, Veranda and House
Oh,
Beautiful, ones
yes.
that are still around, Elle Decor. And I had such an interest in that. And then at this time of life where I was thinking about transitioning from PR, we actually had moved from an apartment in Santa Monica, because I was living in
Okay.
LA, to our first home that we were renting. And that was a really, fun project to think of, like, okay, now I have like a house,
Mhm.
a full house to decorate. I kind of unlocked this like deeper passion for the world of interiors. So that was something that I had put on my list. And then I reached out to some interior designers to think
Okay.
maybe I could work with them and learn interior design. And I did not have much luck. Like, nobody responded to me. And then I thought, well, what do I have? Well, I have a very strong PR and marketing background. I influencer marketing. I'm great with email. I'm great with social media. So then I kind of like pivoted my pitch and went back with more of this, like, a lot of designers at the time were starting e-commerce businesses. This is like
Mm.
6 years ago.
Okay.
And they weren't great, but they, like, the e-commerce businesses didn't look great.
Yeah.
They didn't look like a real like retail site. But obviously they saw the opportunity for the revenue stream, and I saw opportunity for them to improve their e-commerce sites.
Mhm.
So then I came in with this, like, hey, I'm a PR pro. Here's things that I think you can do to
Oh,
enhance your
interesting.
retail site. Same thing, like, strike out. Nobody responded. And
Yeah.
I remember at first being like very discouraged, because I thought, wow, like, I have a lot of experience. Like, I
Yeah,
would
you're like, they should be so grateful that I'm reaching out. Yeah.
somebody is reaching out. And in my mind, it was like a foot in the door into this industry that was interesting to me, that I had no experience in. And then at some point it kind of just dawned on me, you know what? Like, I can learn how to build a website. I can source product. I can learn that. And I know how to market. And so maybe I'll just create this. And the other thing that sort of coincided with this was when we were decorating our home. It was a temporary space. And so I didn't want to invest. I didn't want to invest, nor did I have the budget to invest in like high end furniture.
Mhm.
And, temporary space just didn't make sense. You never know what the next home is going to be and how things will fit. And so when I was shopping online, because that's all I had the time to do, as much as I loved exploring boutiques and, antique shops and the flea markets, it was really dominated. The coastal aesthetic, which was very much my aesthetic, was really dominated by just a couple of very mainstream, well-known brands.
Mm.
And they did it well. But when I looked at, we were living in, I don't know if you know this area, but Manhattan Beach, California, which
Yeah.
is right by the coast. And coastal is a really popular aesthetic. And I went to friends of mine home, like, everyone kind of had the same things.
Yeah.
And it's like this cookie cutter version of, okay, we all have this chair, and oh, that wallpaper, like 5 of my friends have that wallpaper. And, going back to what you and I talked about before we got on this
Mhm.
call, if something becomes very popular, I lose interest. I
Yeah.
don't want to wear the same things that everyone has. Like, if a dress becomes so popular, I actually don't want it, even if I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
And it felt that way in the home space, where I thought, oh, I actually do like that wallpaper, but I don't want it because
Mhm.
everyone has it. I want my home to feel personal and unique to
Yes.
me. And so I had sort of the I guess those two thoughts colliding of, like, I think I could do this e-commerce thing in a way
Mhm.
that is a better experience, that still feels curated, like these designers are curating it, and like unique finds, but also in this very specific coastal style that is what I love.
Mhm.
And bring it together where I offer something that is not everywhere. And so that was ultimately, the way Cailini Coastal came together.
I love that. And, your point, like we talked about, having something that's different and you're not seeing it everywhere, I think is so special. So tell me a little bit about that. Going from idea that, okay, I have this great business idea that's going to combine, my passion and this unique offering and perspective that isn't out there yet. what were the steps to getting it launched? Because you launched e-commerce. So like setting up a website, getting all of that done, but then also getting your brands and your product and merchandise, because I'm sure that took a while too, and to find these unique pieces.
Yeah. So I actually love this question because I think this will be very encouraging to any budding entrepreneurs listening. So I am such a rule follower. I am full of integrity, almost to a fault sometimes. But when I had my PR business, as I mentioned, I had a number of great clients and I was thinking about what I was going to do. Once I decided, I gave my clients like multiple months notice, even though I was a consultant, because I wanted them to all be set up for success,
Mm,
and ended my contracts at the end of 2019.
okay.
I did not do anything with Cailini Coastal until January 1st. Because again, I just was like so black and white. I do not want anyone to ever question whether or not, under a contract with them, my time was spent doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I actually do think that's really important because I think people just, the relationships stay intact, and I think people really respect that.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, I gave myself 4 months, and it was no more. So January 1st till April 2020 to do it all. And I knew very little. I knew, how to engage with influencers. I started building the social media in January. I obviously was somewhat savvy to that, but still starting from zero, which
Mm-hmm.
is different than running an established social media account. And so I really educated myself through, Shopify is the platform I chose. I can't recommend them enough. We're still on Shopify. It's an incredible tool. Their basic, membership is, at the time, I think it was like $40 a month. It's
Yeah.
so affordable. And now based on the size of our business, we're,
Yeah.
we're paying a lot more than that. But as an entry point, it's an amazing platform. I spent hours watching their videos. They have an incredible educational platform. Everything from how to name your business to, light coding tutorials, how to, set up the site. The thing I invested in out of the gate was I hired somebody to help me sort of design the site. And
Okay.
so that was well worth the investment. Can't remember what it was, but it was no more than, I think it was like $2,500, $3,000. And again,
Okay.
that can be much more expensive, but I found somebody who was independent through a friend. It was kind of, she was helping me out, and she helped by like walking me through like, and here's how you change the images, and like, here's how you change the text. But she did like the overall template, which was
Mm-hmm.
very helpful. And Shopify is incredibly user friendly. I mean, you're probably on Shopify, right?
Yes. Yep.
It's amazing. Like if you come with no experience, it's really easy to learn quickly.
Yep.
Um, and then for the sourcing piece of it, it was really again like nothing outside of the box. In the early days, I first looked around my home, and most of the things I actually didn't know who made them. And a lot of it was decor. And decor is really where we sort of focused in the early days because, as I mentioned, like when I was looking to furnish our home, I didn't have this huge furniture budget. And so much online was heavily weighted towards furniture. And I'd think, well, actually, like I, got a secondhand table and I want some beautiful things to put on my bookshelves, like behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would look online, I just felt like it was like living room, dining room, bedroom, furniture, furniture, furniture. And then there's like one tiny section that's like, other, and it's like lighting, decor, mirrors, like all kind of lumped in together
Yep.
and very narrow. And so I always shopped decor. I loved shopping decor in person at stores or like the Rose Bowl flea market. And so I looked around my home and just started like flipping things over, which I never did as a consumer. Like, who makes this? And I started
Yeah.
to find like themes within what I owned. Like, wow, I owned 6 photo frames from this one vendor. Google, like so straightforward. Who's this vendor? Oh, there's a mart in LA, in downtown LA, and they have a showroom. Like it was really so like basic and just really one step after the another, being proactive, learning, and then discovering things that way. There are markets all over the country,
Yep.
which we now attend, but this was early 2020. And by March, COVID
Yeah.
obviously happened. And so I was then kind of like prohibited from traveling, from going anywhere. So then it became a lot of outreach online when I would
Mm.
find, some vendors. And then in April, I launched the business out of my garage with 5 baker's racks. We bought, I say we, but at the time it was just me. I bought very shallow buys, so I would buy
Mhm.
like the minimum. Sometimes it's like 6 pieces. Okay, great, I'll take 6. And because I just didn't know like what was going to
Mhm.
sell, and it was such an edited assortment, and it was all iPhone photos because again it was COVID. I couldn't have
Yeah.
photographer come in, and we lived in this 90s Spanish style home that desperately needed to be renovated. So like there were certain parts of the home that I couldn't even photograph because it just did not fit the vibe. So it was so scrappy, but it worked.
I love that. So, you know, you have such a specific style, this coastal, but like not in a shore cheesy way. It's elegant coastal. How do you stay true when you're selecting new products or new brands? How do you stay true to the brand and your vision and not get like distracted by trends like we talked about, or maybe something is selling really well for a friend who's telling you about, like, how do you stay true to yourself and your brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, again, I sometimes don't know. There are still things we're doing, and we're still a new business. If this is the right way to do things, or it certainly may not be what like the big guys in the industry are doing. But I think for us, what has worked is, and we continue to do, is I still personally select every single product or design, because now we're making our own products,
Yeah.
that is on our website. And there have been times where we've discussed as a team, like at some point, do we bring in a buyer? I mean, personally, I find that to be the most fun part of my job, and never feel like that is something that's sucking time I don't have.
Hmm.
But I also think that that is sort of like the secret sauce of what allows us to have this highly curated look, because it's through the lens of one person.
Mm.
And bigger companies have teams of buyers. They're so data driven. And we have a planner who gives us great data as to like what categories are, our best performers within those categories, what products, and then further down, like what price points work the best.
Mhm.
And I think she and I have a very like yin yang, where she gives the data, which helps overall guide things. But, there are things that I find and discover that I love that do not fit data. And ultimately, as the owner of the business, I can say, well, I'm going to take a bet on this.
Yeah.
And almost always they become incredibly popular products. And so I think it's a bit of a gift that the things that, still that I'm most excited about tend to naturally become bestsellers. And so
Mhm.
that's why I'm so committed to continuing to sort of be the purveyor, because it's just worked for us. And then as for trends, again, personally, I'm not a trend driven
Mhm.
person. I'm much more sort of like classic and timeless in my approach to whether it's fashion, beauty,
Yeah.
or home. And so I think our customer is the same.
Mhm.
So we always look at trends and we kind of assess it of like, okay, in this popular trend, like how can we exist in a way that works for our brand, that's aligned with our brand? And sometimes it's just not, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of an example. Like the color of the year this year, I think is mocha, or maybe
Yeah.
that was last mocha. So brown is generally like not a color that really works for us.
Okay.
We test it in a small way. And so, for example, in the fall, you'll see like small injections of like mocha in a way that works with our overall like creative for fall. And we buy into those trends that are, again, feeling like a little less aligned with our brand in very small ways, just to have
Mhm.
them, just to say like we're participating. And then other times there are trends that work, really well for us, like the bow trend of recent years.
Yes.
Last year, we did an entire holiday collection that was just dedicated to bows. And it was like sensational. But we did them in a way, holiday is different from our evergreen collection. We can be a little bit more non-literal coastal
Mhm.
during that time of year. But we did them in like beautiful blue velvets, in our coastal color palette, in stripes, in patterns that worked for our brand.
Yeah.
Um, and it was really successful. So I would say we're aware of them. We sometimes do lean into them. And then other times it's just good to know like what is out there and what is popular. But we really like always honor first like our true aesthetic.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And I love your point of you being the buyer right now, because I do see sometimes with brands, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or decisions take so long to be made because there's too many opinions going into it. I also am curious because you mentioned now, obviously, you make your own products. So, can you tell me a little bit about then the growth of the company, which is so amazing, and how you went from building and curating and collecting other products to now having a hand in design?
Yeah. Well, so, God, I have learned so much and I am still learning so much about this industry. But, very early on, about a year in, we had, I mean, our first year, which was 2020. And in hindsight, I know that the overall industry just experienced such tremendous growth that many say will never be experienced again in COVID, and people at home shopping for their homes, and the demand on just products for homes. Our growth was absolutely explosive, and we were selling some products out of. I mean, truly, it's wild, Patricia. Out of my garage with myself, and I had like two college age kids who had deferred going to school for a year because of COVID, working for me. We were selling a volume that was competitive with like some major national brands.
Wow.
And we had our vendors telling us that, like, you're selling close to XYZ national brand,
Yeah.
which blew my mind. I mean, we were stocking out like crazy. It was just like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, okay, triple that. Okay, now 10x that number. Like, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, wow, like that's wild. I don't know how. I mean, I think again, we were very, very curated. So we had a much smaller assortment at the time, but we were doing a really large volume in some of the products that we were selling. And so it started actually with one brand called Etu Home.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with them. They make
I had the founder on the podcast before too. Yeah.
Yes, she's wonderful. So we were selling their products like crazy, and at the time, this is when their charcuterie boards were very new. And now there are many, many, many iterations of this, but this was like a newer idea 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, I said to her, I love these charcuterie boards. I'd love to do them in a coastal color. Like, can we do some colors that are exclusive to us? So we started with two boards, a small round, a larger rectangular one. We styled them together, and they were navy and white. And those boards just blew out. And it was sort of crazy. Like we're ordering hundreds, plural, and sold out so quickly. And so it kind of unlocked this thought of like, wow, like something that is exclusive is seems so obvious, but again, not coming from this industry
Mm-hmm.
is really valuable because marketing wise, only we have it. We're not competing price wise because we are not a discount heavy brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so then conversations from there developed with other vendors had a strong business with. Like, how can we co-create? How can we change a color? Can we put a different pattern on this? And then we started to see success with our exclusives. It was like then became the best sellers.
Mm-hmm.
Then we dabbled in wallpaper. We partnered with a couple textile designers to do exclusive wallpaper designs for us. And then wallpaper became this huge category with not even that many SKUs.
Yeah.
So from there, it was very eye opening. And then it became okay, the margins are better. We don't have to compete price wise. Again, like we don't want to get into the game of like the lowest price online wins, which is unfortunately like the truth when you're selling online sometimes. And so it was clear also moving forward for the profitability of the brand, the margins had to be better. I think marketing advantages, certainly now with AI, even more so, like exclusive
Mm-hmm.
proprietary product is the way forward. And then, also I think just to set out to offer what we intended when I started was products you didn't see everywhere,
Yeah.
unique products that feel special. And so about 2 years ago, we put that into the strategy as like, okay, this is a key part of our strategy moving forward. It's going to take years to build. We're still like privately funded. It's funded by, my family. So we're limited with our resources in terms of like what we're able to put in. But so we're really thoughtful and we're doing it in a very strategic way where we're starting with our top categories. So we've already well expanded wallpaper. Art is another top category for us. That is a pretty robust assortment already. And then earlier this year, we started with decor. So we have, photo frames and hurricanes and decorative boxes and trays, starting with tabletop items. And it's so encouraging to see because we actually just earlier this week, we were doing a review of year to date, and our best selling products out of 10 of them, 9 are ours, which is
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
So,
Yeah. That's so amazing. I love, I think that collaborating on products or design is truly kind of where things are going. And like you said, it just makes a unique offering in today where I feel like you're inundated with product and images. So having something unique that's not everywhere is means so much more and I think just benefits everyone all around. I think my listeners would love to hear some tips from you on marketing because, like you said, even at the beginning, you started selling out of certain styles and ordering more. So, and with your background, you're so knowledgeable with this. Just scrolling through social media and seeing the Instagram account and how beautiful it is and well curated and styled, but then even your personal touch in it. Any tips you can share with listeners on social media, marketing, PR, influencers, anything to help them grow?
yeah. So, when we first started, we did not do any paid marketing, which obviously now is a very, important part of our business. I couldn't afford it out of the gate. And so I waited about 6 months. I got to a place where I thought, okay, now is time. And really like dipped our toe in, and finding that partner if you're there is so essential to finding the right partner, because unless you speak that language, there is a huge learning curve. And I think it's
Mhm.
also easy to fall into the just assuming everything they're telling you is true. And a lot of times I've found like there's a lot you need to also like kind of fact check. Not that anyone's necessarily trying to trick you, but the data can be, as I'm sure you know, Patricia, like sometimes misleading.
Yeah.
And I think as a small business in particular, every dollar matters. And so you want to make sure every dollar is being used efficiently.
Yeah.
But aside from paid marketing, when I first started, I think it was almost entirely driven by social media. And when we launched the business, I want to say I had definitely less than 10,000 followers, maybe like 6 or 7. And again, everyone I know says this, but I do think it's true. It feels like with every passing year, it's harder and harder to grow on social
Yeah.
media. So it was easier then. I think it was like 4 or 5 months and I had that many followers. So which I think is much harder to do today. But our our first week, it was just like a very large week. And um, given the number of followers we had, it sort of like blew my mind. It was like a many multiple number of followers in terms of like, the dollars that were spent. And so I thought, wow, like how can we get this from this what felt like tiny pool?
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately what it was that we had like extremely high engagement. And it's sort of as the social media has grown, this has evolved. In the early days, it was just me. It was very scrappy. I was videoing from my home, doing Instagram lives, very natural, like a little haggard because I was like 2 babies at home and a startup. It was very real. It was very authentic. I also really enjoy connecting with people. So people would DM questions. I would respond. I got into conversations with people via Instagram. This is me. Like I can talk to anyone. Like if I'm on Metro North heading into the city, like 50% of the time I'm talking to the person around me. So like if you're not naturally like, have this, like you shouldn't try to force it. Like it should feel
Yeah.
authentic. But I didn't realize at the time what I was building was like extreme loyalty and a community that felt incredibly connected. And so I think if you're in these early stages and can do it, revealing a bit of like who you are, your personality behind the scenes really kind of makes people feel much more connected to than say Cailini Coastal social media today. I
Yeah.
do touch it, absolutely. But there are 2 other people who are touching that account. And, I do occasionally jump in and respond to DMs, but mostly it's not me. And I think that, it feels today a little bit more like a business than a
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm.
And I think that as long as you can, and it's funny, it's actually something we're actively trying to like pull back because I think it's a huge differentiator from like the big brands out there that, often don't have faces or personalities. And when we launched, I genuinely think there were a lot of people who clearly like liked the product, right? They
Mm-hmm.
liked the assortment. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. But they wanted to support the brand. They're like, there's a mom with like Irish twins in her garage. I've been watching her build this and I love her stuff. And at the time, we were giving 100% of our profits to a nonprofit we're still partnered with that supports family homelessness. There was like a wonderful cause and very authentic. And so I really feel like that wild success that really made no sense. I mean, we were in like Shopify's top 5% of new businesses that year. It was
Wow.
crazy. But I
Yeah.
still to this day have people message me and say, I've been following you since the garage. Like, I love seeing where you are. And so I think that is huge. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
believe there's more value to that in some ways as a new business than like paid advertising because
Yeah.
an ad photo is so much less personal. And when people DM you, again, you don't have to like ask about their kids like I did because I just can't help myself, but respond and be
Yeah.
kind. Like
Yeah.
it might sound so obvious, but truly people love connection. And I think Patricia, I said this at the Neo Coastal
Yeah.
event, but I started an account in February for
Yeah.
a new home. We purchased a home on Nantucket, and I wanted to show the design without like totally taking over Cailini Coastal's account. And that account is growing faster than Cailini Coastal. And that account is all me. And
Yeah.
the same thing is happening where like people
Hmm.
DM me, they ask me questions, I respond, they share personal stories, I respond. And so I think that is the easiest low lift thing you can do that is so, so important.
Yeah, that personal touch, it goes such a long way. So I always ask this question to everyone, so you know it's coming, but what does preppy mean to you? How would you describe preppy and what's your interpretation of it?
I think preppy is it's so timeless. I think it's polished and clean cut, but also playful.
Mm.
I think of preppy with like pops of color, but I also think of it as, I don't know, white and navy, like
Yeah.
classic colors as well. And I think, of course, for me, I always go back to home and interiors. And I think, the preppy aesthetic actually is very coastal in many ways. I think it's also has like Americana in it. And I think I live in two very preppy places, Connecticut and Nantucket.
Yep, exactly. I like what you said there too, polished and playful. I think that's perfect. So, I'm curious if you could pick any dream person to have your products in their home or to be a customer, who would that be? Or even maybe reverse that, and you could even pick who would be your dream collab or brand to carry.
Oh gosh. That is a great question. I definitely have a few, but I think I would say right now, and I'm manifesting this in case anyone from their team listens to this, Tucker Knock. I think
Yes.
that as we build our own product, they're definitely on our radar. I mean, they have a marketplace that sells home brands, and they're
Mhm.
obviously, sort of primary focus is in apparel. But I think I really respect that brand. I've listened to many a podcast with their founder and CEO, and I think she's so smart. And when I listened to, I think the first one, I thought, wow, our brands are so aligned in their approach of like really sort of creating a very distinct aesthetic, great lifestyle imagery. I mean, we invest and have from the beginning a ton in our photography. Um, and they're so curated. I can see a photo and I know exactly when it's a Tucker Nuck
Yep.
product or a Tucker Nuck image. So that would probably be at the top of my list.
Such a good one. I could totally see a collab down the line with you two. Um, Now, is there a resource that you can leave listeners with? I love asking this question because I always take notes of this, but it could be a great book you've read, a great podcast you listen to, a newsletter, or a group you're part of. Any sort of resource you can share with listeners?
Yeah. So, as a mom, I think a mom and a business owner, time is always a challenge and using your time most efficiently. And then, of course, there's all the other things like you want to be a healthy person and fit in like a workout here or there. And so that's something I have struggled with very much so at certain points of the business. And so I actually read a book that was referred to me by our planner who works at Cailini Coastal. It's called Uptime, and it's by Google's productivity director, which only Google would have a role such as that. I found it really helpful. Like I actually was highlighting and annotating, and I partially read it and then partially managing my time, listened to it when I was driving to and from the office.
Mhm.
Um, I really found that helpful, and there were some great like takeaways that I implemented that have really helped me manage time.
Oh, okay. I'm going to write that one down for sure and check it out. So, my final question is where can people find you? Let them know where they can shop Cailini Coastal, where they can follow along both accounts on social media, and anything else like that that you want to share so that people can support and shop.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, so you can follow us at CailiniCoastal.com and at Cailini Coastal on social media. And it's spelled Cailini. But if you Google it any other way, it should pop right up. And then our new account, which is the one that I solely manage, is following sort of our life on Nantucket, and the design of our Nantucket home is AC Beach House. So ACK Beach House on Instagram.
Excellent. Well, Meg, I had so much fun. I feel like I could talk to you for like a whole other 3 episodes. But I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this today. Thank you for being on the Preppy Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Patricia. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Preppy Podcast. I hope this put a little prep in your step for the day. Please subscribe, rate, and review on wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow along with @the Preppy Podcast on social media.